Hi everybody. In this video I am going to give you a short overview of the course, Social Work 520, which is your policy class, and an overview of week one and what are the activities you're going to undertake and what I hope you take away from those activities. So I teach the course 520, the policy class, from the perspective or the lens of the Social Work Code of Ethics, because I believe that the Social Work Code of Ethics calls us as social workers to be involved in policy work to help make the lives of those we serve better in terms of the policies that folks have to interact with. And in many ways, this policy focus makes us different as social workers from people in other fields like sociology and psychology and anthropology. That this particular policy focus is one of the things that make us unique as a profession. And so that's the lens that I teach this class from, and specifically the Social Work Code of Ethics. And it's my goal at the end of the class that you have the skills and the confidence that you need to be able to fulfill your ethical responsibilities as a social worker that are outlined in the Code of Ethics. And I would just like to read one small section of the Code of Ethics to you, and we'll do an exercise about it next week, but I just want to hear you to hear it today. Section 6.04 of the Social Work Code of Ethics is entitled Social and Political Action, and there are several parts to this Code of Ethics, but one part I think is particularly relevant to the course that we're going to undertake, and it is: social workers should engage in social and political action that seeks to ensure that all people have equal access to the resources, employment, services, and opportunities they require to meet their basic human needs and to develop fully. So that says social workers should engage in social and political action, right? And we're going to be working on that for all 10 weeks, the idea of how do we engage in social and political action. And the next part of this section, again in section 6.04, is social workers should be aware of the impact of the political arena on practice and should advocate for changes in policy and legislation to improve social conditions in order to meet basic human needs and promote social justice. So again, we have to be aware of the political arena and its impact on our practice as a social worker and on the people we serve, and we should advocate for changes in policy and legislation. And so it's my goal when you leave this class to have the skills and the confidence to be able to do those things. Now, I'm hoping that maybe, perhaps two of you may become social work policy practitioners like me, but if that's not the case, I hope that you leave this class feeling like you have the skills to fulfill the steps and requirements set out in the Social Work Code of Ethics. So some of the topics that we're going to be covering and some of the things that I think are critical skills for a social worker to have is I want you to be able to read policy. And what does that mean? Read a piece of legislation. I want you to be able to go to the Oregon Code and open up the Oregon Code and be able to read a piece of legislation and know what it means. Similarly, administrative rules. Many of you are social workers who interact with child welfare or work in child welfare, in criminal justice systems, in other systems that are governed by your state's administrative rules. And I'm hoping that at the end of this class, you'll be able to read and interpret and understand those administrative rules. Another thing beyond sort of reading those topics is assessing them. So the course assignments, the 4 assignments that make up the policy analysis for this course are all about how we assess policy from a social work perspective. And so we will be working on that idea all term about how you look at a piece of policy and assess it to see if it is in line with social work values, if it is socially just, if it works for equity and fairness in our culture. And so we'll be giving you some skills to do that, and you'll be practicing those skills in that throughout that assignment process. And again, there's I think 4 pieces of that assignment. The next thing that you should be able to do is understand how implementation works. So one of the things that I challenge students to do is, if they are in a social service setting and they are implementing policy, to make sure that they go back and understand what the policy says and what the administrative rules say. Now that may seem silly if you're a frontline social worker, but as you advance in the profession, it's your responsibility to understand, are your agency's policies in line with what the law says, what the federal law says, what the state law says, what the administrative rules say? And you may find yourself responsible for implementing those policies. So being able to read, assess, and then implement is a third skill that we're going to talk about in the course of this class. The last 2 things that this class focuses on is advocacy and social action. So not only knowing how to read and assess pieces of legislation, but what are the steps to be actively involved in changing policy are really important. And those are fun things to talk about. The politics of how to get involved and how to do social action and how to engage the people you serve and your clients into the policy process. Those can be very fun and exciting things to do. So we'll spend some time talking about that in the course. And we're also going to be talking about values and interest groups. And so one of the lenses that this class examines policy through is the idea of values and social values, and the values that we hold as social workers and how they integrate with policy and the policy actions that we do. Similarly, we'll be looking at values that may be in conflict with social work, but have been imbued in our policies and laws, and trying to understand how we got sort of the things that we got. How do we get TANF, right? Welfare reform. Why does it look the way it looks? What are the values that went into building that policy? And even though those values may be in contradiction with social work values, we still want to examine how they became reified into law. And so different interest groups and values, the way different people view the role of the government. Right? So what do Democrats feel the role of the government is in terms of social welfare? What do Republicans feel like the role of government is? Those 2 groups of individuals have very different ideas about the role of government. And we really will dig into that idea that social policy can be all about a tension between 2 different groups of individuals who feel that the role of government is different, and how policy comes together to meet both of their needs, or sometimes, unfortunately, none of the needs of the people who are making the policy or impacted by it. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is economics, because our capitalist system, our system of government, our system of capitalist government is really impactful in terms of policy, how we tax people. Modalities of taxation and tax patterns have a great deal of impact on how we fund social services and how we fund social welfare policies. And so we will look at John Maynard Keynes, we will look at economics, and we will dig into some economic theory in the course of this class. But it will all be accessible, and this is a tough class. I will tell you that. I've been teaching this class for about 15 years, and so I know that students struggle with this. I can tell you with 100% assurity that if you make it through this class, you'll make it through every class that you have at the School of Social Work. That this class is about thinking, and it's about assessing knowledge, and it's about critical thinking skills, and it's about research, and it's about practice. And all of those things are important to your success as a student and as a social worker. So I think that this is a foundation social work class because it is absolutely critical to the field of social work that we do policy, that we interact with policy, and that we are confident with these skills. So I am very happy to be bringing that, all of the skills to you. And again, if you haven't watched my instructor video, my introduction to the instructor video, please take a couple minutes to do that. It's only a couple minutes long, and it gives you kind of a background about who I am and the type of policy I practice. To go on to the idea about what we're going to cover this week, this week is really all about what is policy, right? It's just, what is this beast that we call policy? And where is it rooted? In government? I'll tell you, it's in the Constitution. The idea of promoting the general welfare is really what the background of social welfare policy, if you trace it all the way up to the roots of our government, it is in the Constitution. You're going to listen to 2 history lectures, because this class is your history of social work class also, and the history of social welfare policy is very integral to the history of social work. So you'll hear 2 sort of longish lectures about the history, but they're very interesting. You'll be doing some readings from your main text, and then from an article that's from 1986. It's fascinating, where a political scientist named Hugh Heclo has written about Republicans and Democrats and their view on the policy process and the tensions that they have. And the thing is that this was written in 1986. It's about Ronald Reagan, and you could strip out the name Ronald Reagan and put in Donald Trump, and it would be the same today. Right, so it's fascinating that from 1986 to today, that there's not a lot that has changed. I hope you enjoy that article. It can be difficult to, not difficult in terms of concepts to understand, but difficult in terms of it's a new way of thinking. But I do have an exercise about that. You have some things due on Thursday. You have some things due on Sunday. Those are all spelled out in D2L. And again, I invite you to come to my office hours on Thursday from 7 to 8 through Google Hangout, and we can chat about your readings and about any of the questions you have through the week. So I hope you had a great New Year, and here's to week 1. Let's do this. Bye.